What if the greatest freedom you'll ever feel doesn't come from having more friends, but from needing fewer? At some point after 70, the silence that once felt lonely starts to feel like peace. The calls that stop coming no longer sting, they relieve. And the friendships you once clung to begin to feel like stories whose final chapters have already been written. This isn't about isolation, it's about liberation. Because the truth is, many of us spend our whole lives believing that being liked means being fulfilled, that more invitations, more group chats, more names in our contact list means more worth. But when the noise fades and the room finally quiets, a new question emerges. Who are you when there's no one left to impress? In this video, we explore why after 70, you may not need more friendships, but instead, more honesty, more solitude, more peace. Not everyone will understand, but by the end of this story, you just might. 1. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. After 70, social validation loses its importance. Friendships based on reputation, appearances, or career fade. True fulfillment comes from within, not from maintaining superficial ties. There's a moment that happens quietly after 70. No dramatic announcement, no fanfare. It happens the day you wake up and realize that your phone hasn't rung in days. And yet, you don't miss it. You haven't made lunch plans. You haven't answered every message. And still, somehow, you feel lighter. That's when it begins, the unspoken shift from needing connection to choosing peace. The truth that no one warns you about. You don't need friends the way you used to. Not anymore. It's not that you're bitter. It's not that you've given up. It's that something changes inside you. Something calm, something sacred. For decades, life revolved around others, partners, children, co-workers, neighbors, acquaintances. You were someone's rock, someone's invitee, someone's emergency contact. But when you cross into your 70s, you begin to see what all that social spinning has cost you. Your rest, your boundaries, your clarity. Take Carol, for instance. In her 40s and 50s, her calendar was a battlefield of brunches, birthday reminders, and just checking in calls. She held friendships like unpaid jobs, never quitting, even when they drained her. But after turning 72, something shifted. She stopped replying to texts that exhausted her. She stopped performing cheerfulness for people who didn't know her sadness. And in the silence that followed, she found something shocking. Relief. It's not that connection isn't valuable. It is. But not all connection is kind. Not all friendships are built to last every version of you. Many are forged in shared phases, parenting years, office camaraderie, neighborhood obligations. And when those phases pass, so do the bonds. You don't have to feel guilty about that. In fact, letting go may be the most honest thing you ever do. You start to realize that some friendships were built on momentum, not meaning. You kept them alive out of habit, not truth. You asked, "How are you?" and braced for a complaint. You showed up to dinners and smiled through stories you'd heard 100 times, wondering what would happen if you simply didn't go. And then one day, you don't. And nothing falls apart. That's not loneliness. That's awakening. Friendship after 70 isn't about being liked. It's about being at peace. You don't need a crowd to validate your existence. You don't need a birthday party to feel remembered. You need honesty. You need stillness. You need the freedom to ask yourself, what do I actually want today? And not have the answer depend on anyone else. This is the season of release, the time when your energy becomes sacred. And part of protecting it is understanding that friendships don't always age well. Some wither when you stop fixing them. Some were always one-sided, and some were never truly friendships at all, just shared loneliness, cleverly disguised. The beautiful part? You're allowed to let them go. Not out of spite, not out of ego, but out of love for yourself. 2. Peace becomes more valuable than socializing. Solitude becomes a source of healing rather than loneliness. Many friendships bring obligations or emotional fatigue. It's okay to say no and reclaim your time and energy. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes not from lifting heavy things, but from lifting conversations that go nowhere. And after 70, that fatigue becomes unbearable. It's the moment you realize you've been performing friendship like a well-rehearsed role, smiling, nodding, offering reassurances, and always being available. But inside, you're tired, not physically, spiritually. The kind of tired that makes you dread the doorbell, even if it's someone you used to love seeing. We grow up learning that being social is healthy, that having more friends means you're winning at life. But no one ever teaches us how to protect ourselves from the wrong kind of company. The draining kind, the kind that leaves your spirit cluttered, that calls you only when they need to vent, but never when you need to breathe. After 70, there's a quiet revolution inside. You stop living to please. You start craving peace, not presence, and that's where your real life begins. Margaret, a retired teacher, once described it this way. I used to think silence was lonely. Now I realize it's where I finally hear myself. She used to go to weekly lunches, check on every neighbor, and host holidays like her house was a revolving door of obligation. But every time guests left, she felt hollow, not fulfilled. Because she wasn't connecting, she was performing, keeping up appearances, avoiding the fear of what might happen if she chose herself instead. Then one year, she stopped hosting Thanksgiving, just said no, no big drama, just a quiet refusal. The response? Mixed. A few guilt trips, a few people who stopped calling, but also a few days of peace so rich, so honest, that she cried from gratitude, not because she was alone, but because she was finally free. We don't talk enough about how much energy it takes to maintain friendships that have long outlived their season. The small talk, the updates, the careful filtering of what you say so someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable. It's not that people are bad, it's that you've changed. And pretending otherwise is exhausting. You no longer need to fill the room with noise to feel worthy. You no longer need to say yes, because saying no makes you feel guilty. That guilt? It's not real. It's a story, one that told you your time doesn't belong to you. But after 70, that story can end. This chapter is about choosing peace over performance, not isolation, intention. You still love people. You just don't need to audition for them anymore. You don't need to entertain. You don't need to be on. You just need to be. Quietly, honestly, completely. And if some people fade away because you stopped playing the part, let them. You're not here to keep everyone else comfortable. You're here to live your truth, even if it means doing it alone, softly, and on your own terms. 3. Fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. Older adults often realize that some friendships were one-sided. Letting go of unreciprocated relationships brings relief. Prioritizing quality over quantity becomes key to emotional well-being. There's a quiet ache that builds over the years, not from aging, but from accumulating small, repeated letdowns. The call they didn't return, the promise they forgot, the visit that never came. And somewhere after 70, you start to feel the full weight of those disappointments. Not because you expected too much, but because you expected honesty. What surprises many people as they get older isn't how few friends they have left, but how few of those friends were ever truly there. The truth is, when you have fewer friendships, you have less pretending to do. You spend less time waiting for people to become who they promised they were. You spend less time excusing the small slights, the emotional absences, the one-way conversations. You begin to see the pattern, that many of the relationships you called close only remained intact because you kept doing all the work. This was Helen's story. At 75, she could count her so-called friends on 2 hands, but she couldn't name one who had asked how she was in the past year. They reached out when they needed a ride, a referral, a favor. But when she had surgery, no one showed up. Not even a card. That was the moment something cracked open in her. A realization that hurt, but healed. She was holding on to people who had already let go of her. Instead of growing bitter, Helen got brave. She started trimming her circle, not with rage, but with clarity. One by one, she let go of the names that caused more pain than presence. And as her circle shrank, something else grew. Her peace. She stopped checking her phone hoping for messages, stopped wondering if she'd been forgotten, because suddenly, she didn't need to be remembered by people who never truly saw her. We're taught that more friends mean more love. But after 70, we see the flaw in that math. Because love isn't measured in numbers. It's measured in effort, in reciprocity, in presence when it counts. When you reduce your friendships to the few that are mutual, nourishing, and respectful, you protect your time, your heart, and your mind. You stop investing in the emotional stock market of people who only show up when it benefits them. You stop hoping people will change. And most of all, you stop tying your value to how many names you can list at Christmas. It's not giving up. It's growing up. Again. A second, deeper maturity that says, I'd rather sit alone in honesty than dine with people who drain me. And that choice, that's healing. 4. Your time becomes more precious. Time feels more finite after 70, making people more selective. Maintaining friendships out of habit feels burdensome. Redirecting time toward meaningful activities fosters greater satisfaction. By the time you reach 70, one truth becomes undeniable. Time has become the most sacred currency you have. And the older you get, the more you realize, not everyone deserves a piece of it. You start to see how often you've given your time out like loose change, polite conversations that left you empty, obligations dressed up as connection, long phone calls that stole your rest and gave back nothing. And so, you begin to close the gates, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. There's something powerful that happens when you reclaim your hours. You stop answering calls you don't feel like taking. You stop showing up to events that once felt like duty. You stop apologizing for needing solitude. The biggest lie you were told in your younger years is that being available is a virtue. But now, you understand that access to you is a privilege, not a right. Take Joe, a retired carpenter who once filled his days helping neighbors fix fences, driving old friends to appointments, answering calls at all hours just to be a good guy. But the truth was, he was burning out. He couldn't remember the last time he sat with his own thoughts. One day, after a particularly draining week of favors, Joe sat on his back porch, stared out at the trees and whispered to himself, When did I stop living my life and start filling everyone else's? The next week, he changed everything. He started saying no. No explanations. No long messages. Just gentle, quiet boundaries. And something surprising happened. No one really noticed. The people who only saw him when they needed something disappeared. The ones who truly mattered. They understood. Some even followed suit, admitting they were also tired from pretending. That's what makes this lesson so powerful. It doesn't just free you. It gives others permission to free themselves too. You owe no one your schedule. You owe no one your energy. You've given decades of care, of presence, of support. Now your time belongs to you. To your books, your hobbies, your walks, your naps, to your peace. Every time you choose not to answer a message right away, you reinforce something vital. That your value does not depend on your availability. That your life is not a service others can log into whenever they feel like it. You can still love people, still show up when it matters, but from a place of choice, not obligation. There's a quiet power in deciding who gets your mornings, who gets your energy, who gets your yes, and more importantly, who doesn't. Because your time is not what you spend, it's what you invest. And at this stage of life, you've earned the right to spend it wisely. 5. True companionship comes from within. Learning to enjoy one's own company can be liberating. Self-awareness and comfort with solitude foster peace. Deep internal connection replaces the need for constant external validation. There's a kind of friendship that doesn't require effort, small talk, or even another person. It's the friendship with your own soul, the quiet understanding you carry within you when everyone else is gone and the room is still. And after 70, that's the connection that matters most. Not because you don't care about people anymore, but because you finally come home to yourself. In younger years, solitude feels like punishment. We're taught to fear it, told that being alone is being unloved, unworthy, unsuccessful. But that narrative fades when you begin to actually spend time with yourself, on your terms, in silence, in softness, without the noise of social expectations whispering what you should be. And in that silence, something incredible happens. You hear your own voice again. For decades it was drowned out, by roles, by relationships, by the need to be who others needed. But now you can ask yourself, what do I like? What do I want? What kind of day brings me joy? Joanne, a widow in her early 80s, once said, "I used to think my husband was the only person who really understood me. But after he passed, I started walking alone, cooking alone, even talking to myself aloud. And slowly, I realized I understand me better than anyone ever has." That's self-companionship. It's not loneliness. It's alignment. It's drinking your coffee how you like it, reading what moves you, walking not to reach a place but to hear your thoughts. It's being able to sit quietly in your favorite chair and not reach for the phone, not because no one's calling, but because you're not waiting anymore. The world often confuses independence with isolation. But those who've lived long enough know the most solid people are the ones who are deeply rooted in themselves. They're not cold. They're not selfish. They've just been through enough to know that the most reliable source of comfort comes from within. When you develop that internal bond, everything changes. You stop people-pleasing. You stop needing reassurance. You stop fearing time alone. You become your own sanctuary. And from that place of inner steadiness, you can still welcome others, but without neediness, without expectations, without fear. The friendships that survive this stage of your life are the ones that respect your space, not fill it. The ones that see you clearly, not cling to who you used to be. After 70, the goal isn't to be surrounded. It's to be centered, to walk with yourself as your closest ally, to love your own company so fully that anyone who enters your life becomes a bonus, not a necessity. Because when you enjoy being with yourself, you stop chasing others to complete you. You're already whole. 6. Letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life. Letting go of social expectations creates space for joy. It's not about isolation, it's about intentional living. Prioritizing self-alignment leads to a richer, more authentic experience in later life. By the time you reach your 70s, you stop being afraid of silence. You stop chasing after replies. You stop showing up for people who never really saw you. And in that brave, quiet letting go, you begin something far more profound than a new phase of life. You begin to live on your own terms. Letting go isn't bitter. It's not lonely. It's not a failure of connection. It's a celebration of clarity, of understanding that the most important relationship you'll ever have isn't with a group of people who once knew you. It's with the version of yourself who never stopped growing, even when others stopped noticing. And here's the secret no one talks about. When you stop trying to hold on to everyone, your hands finally become free. Free to create, to rest, to love again, without resentment, to live in a way that honors you. For decades, your value may have been tied to what you gave others, your time, your attention, your presence at every birthday, every brunch, every crisis. But now your value lives in what you give yourself. A quiet morning, a long bath, a walk that doesn't end in someone else's living room. We're taught that aging means shrinking, but the truth is, it can mean expanding into your truth, into your preferences, into a life that isn't dictated by social roles, but by soul roles. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally understand that not everyone is meant to walk the full journey with you. Some were only meant for chapters, and your story, your full, unfiltered, quietly magnificent story, deserves space to unfold without the weight of outgrown expectations. So if you find yourself sitting alone more often, not answering every call, spending your evenings in the stillness of your own choosing, don't feel sad. Feel sovereign. You haven't lost friends. You've gained yourself. And that, at this age, is the greatest reunion of all.